Story 1.
My wife betrayed me after 33 years of marriage. After 33 years together, my wife cheated on me. She begged for forgiveness, but I told her to pack her things, and I filed for divorce. We'd been married for over 3 decades. 2 grown children, 2 grandchildren. Our pride and joy. We met back in the 80s at a nightclub where I worked. One date led to another. 2 months later, we moved in together, and 2 years after that, we got married. Life was good. Work, kids, laughter, everything felt solid. As the years went on, my active job turned into a desk one, and I gained a lot of weight. So much that intimacy became difficult. I'd get asthma attacks halfway through. Still, we stayed loyal. I'd been cheated on before, so we both agreed that infidelity was something that could never be forgiven. I truly believed we would grow old together. After 20 years of a mostly dead bedroom, I decided to change. I lost 80 kilograms in 2 years, and even had surgery to remove excess skin. I had 3 reasons. I wanted to live long enough to see my grandkids grow, I wanted to be healthy, and I wanted to bring passion back into our marriage. It worked. For the past 2 years, we were intimate several times a week. She seemed genuinely happy. I could see it in her face, in her body. We were enjoying life again. She told me she loved me every day, and I always told her the same. I never cheated, and I truly believed she didn't either. A few weeks ago, she went on a trip with her 2 sisters to another state. I didn't mind. I trusted her completely. We always had open phones and shared our locations for safety reasons, not out of control. Trust was never an issue. When I lost weight, women started paying attention to me again, but I never acted on it. I was happily married. My wife sometimes said she felt insecure because I had become the attractive one while she'd gained some weight. But I didn't care about that. I loved her in every form. I told her she was beautiful every single day. Then came the call that shattered my life. I was driving home from work when she called, crying hysterically. She asked if her sister had talked to me. I said no. Then she blurted out through sobs that she had cheated on me, that she'd slept with another man. She kept saying she didn't know what came over her, that it was a horrible mistake, that she hated herself. Apparently, she and her sisters had gone drinking. A married couple they met joined them. After the bar closed, her sisters went to bed, and she, drunk, went with that couple to their hotel room to keep drinking. According to her, they complimented her, told her she was sexy and that I was lucky. Then the man started touching her while his wife encouraged it. They told her no one would ever know, just to enjoy it. She claimed it felt like she wasn't even herself, but she still went through with it. She slept with that man while his wife watched. In the morning, she woke up in bed with both of them and ran back to her room. Her sisters saw her leaving and forced her to confess what happened. She told her she had to tell me or she would. That's when my wife called, sobbing and begging me to forgive her. I sat in my car in shock, feeling my heart break apart. 33 years, gone in one night. I hung up and turned off my phone. For 2 days, I shut out the world. I cried for the woman I thought I knew, for the life we'd built, for the future that no longer existed. My entire world had collapsed. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were hundreds of messages from her and her sisters. The last one said she was driving home. Our kids had been trying to reach me too. She had told them she was worried about me. I called my kids and told them the truth. I told them that no matter how angry they felt, she was still their mother and their children's grandmother. That didn't change. Before she came back, I left her a note telling her to pack her things and go stay with her mother. Then I sent her a message, the last one I'll ever send. I told her we're getting divorced. I don't want details. I don't want explanations. She chose this. She chose to destroy everything we had. Now she and everyone else will live with the consequences. Our marriage is over. And to the few people who told me to stay strong, thank you. It means more than you know.
Update 2. To everyone accusing me, you've got your own demons, so good luck dealing with them. This will be my last update for a while. Writing this out has actually made me feel lighter, as if I've finally exhaled after holding my breath for weeks. I talked to my wife yesterday. After so many years together, we'd never been able to sleep without the other next to us, not for decades. But last night, for the first time, I actually slept peacefully without her. She came home looking like hell. Tired, guilty, terrified, and with freshly dyed hair, as if that could somehow change who she was. Normally, my heart would have softened instantly, and I would have rushed to comfort her. Not this time. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. She burst into tears and tried to hug me, mumbling how sorry she was, how she'd ruined everything. I raised my hand and told her not to touch me, just to sit down. I asked if she wanted coffee. She nodded. I poured 2 mugs and sat back down. She kept staring at me like a frightened child. When she started to speak, I stopped her, told her to just listen and answer when asked. I said, "This is over. You made your choice, now I'm making mine." I'd already decided, but I wanted to hear some truth from her before it all ended. I told her I had spoken to her sister, and even to the other couple, a lie. I wanted to see how she'd react. Inside, I felt strange, sad, angry, disappointed, but calm. That calmness scared her more than anything. I asked how many times. She said it was physical only once, but twice more over video calls. She explained how it started with flirty work chats that got out of hand. Eventually, the man's wife joined in, and after a few months, they started doing explicit video calls. My wife admitted she'd always fantasized about being watched by another woman, and they were more than happy to make that happen. She cried while saying it, repeating that it all went too far, that she knew it was wrong, and that the danger of it made it even more exciting. I stopped her mid-sentence. I didn't want to hear excuses. After a long silence, she finally admitted that when she met them on that trip, it was planned all along. I asked if she'd ever intended to tell me. She said, "No, it was just something I wanted to experience once and forget about forever." I told her that was complete garbage, that cheating once or 1,000 times didn't matter. The result was the same. I said the only people she'd hurt now were our children and grandchildren if she kept lying. Then I told her straight. I didn't believe a word of what she said, and it didn't even matter anymore. That's when she realized I wasn't going to work on the marriage. She started begging me to stay, promising to do anything, even said she'd let me sleep with other women if that's what it took. She kept crying that it would never happen again. I told her to stop, that she'd already humiliated herself enough. I said if I ever slept with another woman, that would mean the marriage was already over, and it was. When she reached for my hand, I pulled back. I told her I would never touch her again. Not out of cruelty, but because the woman I married no longer existed. She died the night she chose to betray me, and worse, when she planned it. All the beautiful memories, our first house, raising our kids, laughing together, are now just that, memories. I told her we'd sell the house and business, split everything evenly. She could keep the car, I'd take the truck and the motorcycle. She could even take the cats. Then I made it clear, no calls, no texts, no contact unless it's about the kids or grandkids. I'll handle everything through the lawyers. She started crying again, saying I was cold and emotionless. I told her, no, I was just honest. Her choices left nothing inside me but emptiness. She destroyed everything I loved. After that, I left her alone to pack her things. I went to my daughter's house, played with my granddaughter, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. When I came back home, my wife was gone. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Update 3. It's been 5 insane weeks since my soon-to-be ex-wife threw our marriage in the trash. I've had plenty of time to think, and I still know I made the right choice. I could never trust her again. The thought of touching me makes me sick. She made the decision to cheat, thinking she'd get away with it. She didn't. She's still living with her mother. I've been getting the house ready to sell. We lived here for 20 years, so there was a lot of stuff to clear out, but it's done. The house is on the market, and we already have a couple of interested buyers. The business was sold last week to one of our longtime clients. People say divorce is tough, but until you're in it, you don't realize how draining it really is. Legally, we have to live separately for a full year and 1 day before filing, then another few months before it becomes official. Only after that can the property division be finalized. By the time that happens, I intend to have nothing left tying me to her. Once she signs the last paper, I'll finally be free to move forward. Her mindset, however, is a whole different story.
Update 4. My son only spoke to her once, and judging by how it went, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. Just so it's clear, my kids are adults with their own families. I told him that time would heal things, that despite everything, she's still his mother, and she was a good one. I don't want her actions to destroy their bond. My daughter, on the other hand, still keeps in touch with her. She's ashamed of what her mother did, but is helping her cope with the divorce. My daughter has always been straightforward. She doesn't sugarcoat anything and makes it clear how badly her mother screwed up. As for my soon-to-be ex-wife, she lives in complete denial. She truly believes that I'll eventually calm down and forgive her. She thinks that all the years we shared will make me reconsider. When she came over to sign the papers for the house sale, she said I'd changed my mind, that I still loved her, that once I realized everything, she'd become the best wife, and that we'd still grow old together. She said this was just a bump in the road. I was stunned. I looked at her and told her she was delusional. She lied, cheated, and betrayed me in the most disgusting way. She let another man inside her while his wife watched. How could she ever believe I'd want to touch her again? She started crying, saying she knew she shouldn't have done it, that she didn't even know what she was doing, that it wasn't even that good. I told her to shut up. I didn't care whether it was good or bad. That wasn't the point. The point was, she still did it. I told her there's absolutely zero chance of reconciliation. I want nothing to do with her anymore. I can't wait to finally start living a life that doesn't include her. She's living in denial, pretending she still has some kind of hold over me, but she doesn't. She lost that right the moment she destroyed our marriage with lies and infidelity. This entire situation is the result of her choices. She knew what she was risking before she did it, so she doesn't get to act naive now. Funny thing, lately I've been getting a lot of attention from other women. I'm not looking for a relationship right now, but it's nice to know I have options if I ever decide to. When my ex found out that some female friends had stopped by to bring me dinner or just chat, she got jealous. She said I should let off some steam and that she'd be waiting for me when I was done. God, how naive can she be? I'm still full of emotions: anger, hate, disgust, loss, sadness. But I'm a strong man. I'll get through this. My main goal now is to cut off all financial ties with her and finally move on. 3 months later, final update. It's been 3 months. The divorce process is still ongoing, but most of the hard work is already done. The business has been sold, the house too, and legally we're living apart. I just have to wait out the required period before the divorce is finalized. Everything we owned has been split evenly. I bought 2 small apartments near my grandkids, one for me to live in and another I rent out. My son and daughter live in different states with their families, so this way I can visit them whenever I want to. I'm working again. A former competitor offered me a part-time position and I took it. It gives me plenty of free time to actually enjoy life again. A few weeks ago, I just got on my motorcycle and rode without a destination, stopped for coffee, watched people, took in the world around me. In the evenings, I'd stop by a pub, have a couple of beers, then ride off again the next day. And honestly, I'm surprised by how easy it feels to talk to women again. I've slept with a couple, nothing serious, no emotions, just fun and physical connection. And I feel free. Some people have asked me if I ever reached out to the couple she cheated with. No, and I never will. It wasn't their decision, it was hers. They mean nothing to me. The best revenge on a cheater is indifference, moving on and living well. Sure, the memories still come back sometimes, but they no longer break me. My ex, though, still lives in a fantasy world. She honestly believes that when I get tired of being alone, I'll take her back. I've made it clear, our marriage is over, forever. I told her I don't care what she does or who she's with now, just like she no longer has any right to care about what I do. My daughter told me her mother is still in denial, ashamed and broken. She's even asked our daughter to convince me to come back. I said that will never happen. She's not ashamed of what she did. She's ashamed she got caught and that I actually walked away instead of forgiving her. Life isn't what I expected, but for the first time in years, I'm genuinely looking forward to the future.
Story 2. Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day hysterical and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. When I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless.
My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming, but slowly I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music, since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie.
Story 3. I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control.
Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Honey, are you okay? You look so pale. What happened? Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by the trail. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket, the evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the school principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 1:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate. He just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I had taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted. But I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Ms. Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there, burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bont were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness, but I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Such a shame we couldn't finish today's session properly," she commented to Terry. Terry gave a brief "agreed" and headed toward the car, clearly signaling that she had no interest in chatting further. "See you later," she tossed over her shoulder before sliding into the car faster than I'd ever seen her move. The ride home was silent. Terry leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and deliberately slowed her breathing as though calming herself. She looked serene, almost too serene, and I couldn't help but think maybe I could use this relaxed moment to probe deeper. "That was a pretty interesting workout, dear. The place is really well equipped. No wonder you've stayed so toned all these years." "Thanks, honey," she replied softly. "You're absolutely right. The program's great, and I enjoy being there. The women are friendly, too. Too bad Mr. Bont wasn't around today." She caught herself too quickly, correcting, Philip Bont. "He usually finishes every session with those tough exercises that really push us to the limit. It's always disappointing when he's not around." Inside, my stomach twisted. I knew all too well how far he had been pushing her body, but outwardly I only muttered, maybe he'll be better by next Thursday. The thought of their next intimate encounter made me sick, but I shoved it down. The following week, I had playground duty at school during pickup time. For those unfamiliar, it's chaos. Kids rushing out, chatting with friends, scanning for parents, while we teachers try to keep order until each child is collected. Near the end of pickup, a car pulled up, and I instantly recognized the driver. It was the same woman who had tried speaking to Terry in the gym.
"Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of the time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't unusual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy, while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey, Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bont or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife. He was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly. "Part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D. Nice."
Story 4. My boyfriend is hiding my stuff. My boyfriend keeps hiding my things, and I have absolutely no idea why. We've been dating for 5 months, and about 3 weeks ago, he moved in with me. His apartment was flooded and needed repairs. Since my roommate is spending some time abroad, I told him he could stay here for about 4 to 6 weeks. By then, his place should have been ready again. At first, everything was great. He used to get jealous a lot before, mostly when we went out separately once or twice a week. But since moving in, he seemed to calm down. Unfortunately, a new and much stranger problem appeared. It might sound petty, but it's driving me insane. Ever since he moved in, my things have started disappearing, only to reappear a day or two later in the exact same spot. I'm not talking about misplacing my keys or forgetting where I put my phone. I know these things are gone. I check, they're not there, and then suddenly they're back. It started with small stuff. Documents, little household items, food. For example, I like taking chocolate to work, so I always keep a box of it at home. A few days after he moved in, one morning, all the chocolate was gone. I asked if he ate it. He said no. That evening, it was suddenly back in the cupboard. When I asked again, he just shrugged and said, "Maybe you didn't see it earlier." It was a whole box of 12 bars. There's no way I just missed it. At first, I thought it was some kind of weird prank, but he gets angry whenever I bring it up. Sometimes it's stuff that isn't even mine, like things I borrowed from friends or important documents I needed for work. It's driving me mad. I'm not crazy. Every time I try to talk about it, he insists I'm making things up to start drama. Why on earth would I make that up? Extra context. We met through mutual friends about 2 months before we started dating. I wasn't planning to get into a relationship. I had just gotten out of one, but he completely swept me off my feet. Gifts, handwritten letters, constant attention. None of my exes were ever like that. Within a month, we were officially together. He's always been a bit controlling, though. He hates when I go out with my friends, especially since most of them are single. He says I just don't want me around bad influences. Sometimes we'd argue about it, but lately, since living together, those fights have been less frequent. First update. First of all, thank you to everyone who reached out with advice and support. I got so many messages asking if I'm okay, and I really appreciate it. After reading your comments and doing some research about gaslighting, I got scared, really scared. So many of you pointed out red flags I had been ignoring. When I looked back, I realized how fast everything between us moved. I wasn't even looking for a relationship, but he love-bombed me into one. He'd get upset if I didn't say I love you quickly enough, if I didn't want to introduce him to my family, if I didn't want to have unprotected sex.
When I refused to book an expensive trip with him, he got angry. He hates when I go out with my friends, especially since most of them are single. He says I just don't want me around bad influences. Sometimes we'd argue about it, but lately, since living together, those fights have been less frequent. One of you pointed out something that made everything click. Almost every missing item was related to me going somewhere. Gifts for friends, keys to my parents' house, documents for my semester abroad. He didn't want me to leave. After that realization, I ordered a hidden camera online. It took 4 days to arrive. In the meantime, I told him that my roommate got an unexpected job offer and would be coming home early, so he'd need to move out. He got angry, of course, but I stayed calm and said there was nothing I could do about it. The next day, he claimed he'd talked to his landlord and could move back next weekend because the repairs finished early. I'm honestly not sure there ever were any repairs. That night, he asked me if I wanted to move in with him afterwards. Said, "You hate your roommate anyway, right?" I never said that. I just smiled and said, "Maybe in June." He looked thrilled. While waiting for the camera, another thing happened. A book I bought for my dad vanished. I casually mentioned it to my boyfriend. The next morning, it was gone. Later that day, he asked me on the way to work, "Did you take the book with you?" That question alone made my skin crawl. I just said, "What book?" He looked confused, said, "The one for your dad." I acted like I had no idea what he was talking about. That night, the book was magically back on my desk. I said nothing. 2 days later, the camera finally arrived. While he was at the gym, I set it up and placed an important envelope on my desk. A few hours later, it disappeared. The next morning, it was back. When I watched the footage, I saw exactly what I'd expected. Him walking by, grabbing the envelope, putting it in his gym bag, and returning it later. Seeing it on video didn't even shock me. I already knew. But that was enough proof for me to make a plan. I didn't confront him. I just needed to get him out of my apartment safely and quietly.
To be honest, I was terrified of how he might react, and by then I'd already decided I would end things as soon as possible. The camera showed what he was doing, but not why, and I knew he'd never admit anything. What bothered me most was realizing I'd probably never know his reason. On his last night, before moving back to his repaired apartment, I told him I wanted to watch an old movie, Gaslight. Thanks to everyone who recommended it. Great choice, by the way. He watched it with me, barely saying a word. I kept commenting about how unrealistic the story was and how the main guy was a total psychopath. I expected some reaction, but he just sat there, visibly uncomfortable. That Sunday, he packed up his stuff and left. My brother helped me hire a locksmith to change all the locks. Once that was done, I texted my boyfriend, well, my ex. I told him it was over, that I didn't want him contacting me again, and that I was genuinely sorry he felt the need to hide my things just to keep things interesting. Since then, he hasn't stopped calling. I don't answer, and I won't. Maybe it wasn't the most dramatic or heroic ending. I could have confronted him with the video, but I just didn't want the drama or confrontation. I wanted it done quietly and permanently. If I learned anything from all this, it's that I need to stop rushing into relationships. For the past 7 years, I've jumped from one long-term relationship straight into another. I think it's time I stay single for a while and focus on school. For now, I'm staying with my brother for a few weeks and plan to change my number soon. I still can't explain why he did it. Maybe it was some kind of compulsion, maybe a twisted joke, or maybe he just wanted to mess with me for control. I'll probably never know. Every message he sent says the same thing, that he has no idea what I'm talking about, that he never took anything. Final update. I wish I could say things ended peacefully, but they didn't. After I broke up with him, I ignored all his calls and endless texts, but I still read most of them. For the first few days, they were full of apologies and begging. I love you, I miss you, I don't know what you think I did, but I swear I didn't do anything wrong. Whatever anyone told you, it's not true. Please give me another chance." Then the tone shifted. "No wonder everyone leaves you. You're pathetic. I hate you. Don't even think about coming back. There won't be a second chance. For your own sake, pray we never see each other again." That week, I finally blocked his number. But strange things started happening. Friends began calling asking if I was okay, saying they'd heard I broke up with him to focus on my mental health. I never told anyone that. Twice, I showed up at work only to find my coworkers surprised to see me. Apparently, my doctor had called in saying I wouldn't be coming in because I was unwell. Then my mom got a Facebook message from him. They'd never met. He pretended to be a worried friend asking if I was okay after my recent breakdown. My family didn't buy it, but explaining it at work was much harder. After about 3 weeks staying at my brother's place, I thought it was safe to go back to my apartment. Big mistake. On my second night home, I saw him outside, standing across the street, staring at the building. Then I saw him again 2 days later, and again after that. A week later, someone started ringing my doorbell at 3 a.m. It happened 5 nights in a row. Then I found little folded notes outside my door, each with a small drawing of a flame. That was the point where I realized he had somehow gotten into the building. I was terrified to even leave the apartment. Eventually, I packed my things and moved back in with my brother and his family. My roommate, who's still abroad, didn't take it well. She was furious when she found out I'd changed the locks without telling her, and even angrier when I said I planned to move out entirely. I get it. It wasn't what we'd agreed on. Looking back, I should have kept her more in the loop. I got permission from her parents, who actually own the apartment, but I never spoke to her directly. I still feel awful for letting him live there at all. I also went to the police to get a restraining order. I had no idea how complicated that process would be. They needed not only proof that he was following me, but also evidence that he was an actual threat to my safety. After hours of waiting, and thanks to my sister-in-law's patience, I finally got the order. The good news? There's at least one bright point. I got accepted into a study abroad program that starts in October. I'll be leaving in August, maybe traveling a bit before classes begin. I've already joined a Facebook group with other exchange students, and it feels good knowing I won't be alone. When I get back, I'll find a small place of my own.
My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mom tried to take it away to please her new husband. Hi, everyone. 3 days ago, I turned 15, and my grandma gave me the most unbelievable gift. She signed over the deed to her penthouse apartment to me. She doesn't even live there full time. She has a house in the suburbs and only stays in the penthouse when she comes into the city. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, something good was happening in my life. Because honestly, this last year has been absolute hell. It started when my dad walked out. He'd always been a complete workaholic, barely around, but the divorce still blindsided me. My mom never even told me directly. One day, I just noticed he was gone. Later, I found out he had already filed for divorce almost a year before. By the time I realized what was happening, it was basically over. He didn't even say goodbye to me, just left me one last message: be good. That was it. I haven't seen him since. When the divorce finalized, Mom got the house and full custody of me and my little brother. Dad technically had visitation rights, but he never used them. He just vanished from my life. Then about 2 months ago, Mom dropped another bomb. She'd been dating someone, let's call him Robert, for a few months, and now they were engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone before she announced he'd be my stepdad. It felt rushed, forced, and honestly pretty desperate. How do you even know someone well enough in 5 months to marry them? When I finally met him, he seemed distant and cold with me. With my 4-year-old brother, though, completely different. Playful, warm, like he was auditioning for best stepdad ever. At first, I brushed it off as him just being more comfortable with little kids.
But a couple of weeks later, Mom sat me down and told me the real reason behind their whirlwind engagement. Robert had been offered a new job in another state. They were moving. And here's the kicker. They planned to take my little brother, but leave me behind with my grandma. When I asked why, Mom basically admitted it was Robert's idea. He wanted my brother because he was still young enough to bond with, but me, at 15, I was too old to ever become his real daughter. Plus, apparently, I'd upset him when I said 5 months wasn't long enough to know someone before marrying them. He decided I was stuck in the past and would never accept him, and my mom agreed. She told me I'd be better off staying with Grandma, that it would be easier. I can't describe the pain I felt in that moment. My dad had already abandoned me, and now my mom was essentially choosing her new husband over me. I love my grandma dearly, and moving in with her wasn't the issue. She's the kindest, most compassionate woman I know. But to hear my own mother say I wasn't wanted, that crushed me. I told her I didn't want to wait until the move. I wanted to live with Grandma immediately. Within a few days, I'd packed my things and left. Those last couple of days at Mom's house were silent. I didn't speak to her, didn't hug her goodbye. Honestly, I didn't think she deserved it. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I knew I'd miss him like crazy. Now I'm at Grandma's, and life already feels lighter. She shows me real love, not conditional affection based on what some guy thinks. Even though the commute to school is longer, I don't care. It's worth it. Every night I call my brother to talk before bed. It hurts that I can only reach him through Mom, but I do it anyway, for him. For the first time in months, I feel like I might actually be okay. I don't really talk to my mom anymore. We only speak when it's absolutely necessary. 3 days ago, I had my birthday, but honestly, it wasn't me who organized anything. My grandma secretly put everything together. She found a couple of my close school friends through my Facebook, invited them along with some relatives, and surprised me with a little party at her house. I hadn't expected anything, so it lifted my spirits a bit, especially after how down I'd been ever since Mom sent me to live with Grandma. But after we cut the cake, Grandma announced her gift to me, and I was completely stunned. She told everyone that for now, her lawyer would act as trustee of her apartment, but the moment I turn 18, full ownership will pass to me. It was the best news I'd gotten in ages. I didn't even think of telling it to my mom. Turns out, someone else did. Yesterday, I found out that one of the party guests must have told her. That evening, Mom called me, sounding way too cheerful for someone about to drop a bomb. She said she knew about Grandma's gift, and that after talking with Robert, her husband, they decided he wanted to adopt me.
The teacher versus the billionaire. I teach at a public school located right next to a trailer park that houses about 250 residents. Roughly 30% of my students live there. Recently, the park was sold for $16.8 million, and everything has gone downhill since. Last week, I got a call from the grandmother of one of my students. She was panicking. An eviction notice had been taped to her front door. The company that bought the park had told all residents to start paying rent through an online portal, but the portal didn't work. Wanting to stay on top of things, she brought in a physical check to pay in person, but the landlord never cashed it. Now she's terrified she'll be thrown out of her home and that her grandson, the boy she has custody of, will have to change schools. I looked over her lease and the eviction notice myself. What they did was completely illegal. The notice wasn't delivered by a sheriff, and her rental agreement wasn't on a month-to-month or lease-to-own basis. I called the sheriff's office to confirm, and the deputy told me the document was a termination of tenancy notice, not a lawful eviction. Curious, I traced the address listed on the notice. It led to a P.O. box in Delaware, 8 hours away. Today, our special education aides told me that every single parent of their students received the same notice on their doors. The new owner is clearly trying to force everyone out, demolish the trailer park, and replace it with high-end apartment buildings for profit. It's a beautiful time of year. Red and yellow leaves, pumpkin fields glowing in the sun, kids full of hope and kindness.
Yet here we are, on a planet that could be a paradise, watching it turn into a nightmare because of the cruel systems people built, systems that put profit over humanity. Update 1. This has turned into a real-life, pension-level mystery. I tried reaching out to local media, but no one wanted to pick up the story. Maybe someone reading this can help uncover what's really happening here. The public sale announcement for the trailer park never listed who bought it. Residents were told to send their checks to P.O. Box 249, Englewood, New Jersey. That's all the information we had. Digging deeper, I found that this P.O. Box is tied to several other trailer parks in Virginia, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, and Florida, all with reported issues like sewage leaks and unsafe living conditions. One of those parks, Pine Creek MHP in California, is registered to a corporation trust center in Delaware, a name that also appears in the Panama Papers for being used as an offshore tax shelter through the Isle of Man. Another company using the same P.O. Box, HA2 Finance One LLC, is connected to the same corporation trust center. A man named Byron Fields is listed as the manager for several of these properties. His email domain links to a dead website called ourhomesofamerica.com. On LinkedIn, there's a Byron Fields Jr. who played football for Duke University and later signed with the Giants. His profile claims he works for Homes of America. So, are we supposed to believe a professional football player is secretly buying up trailer parks through shell companies and evicting low-income families? If anyone can dig deeper, please do. Update 2. Half of the school buses that bring children to the elementary school where I work come from that same trailer park, the one sold in April for $16.8 million. The entire property was appraised at just over $2 million and was never listed for sale. The buyer paid over $10 million for the land and another $6 million for structures, purchasing it directly from the family that had owned and managed it for decades. The buyer's name was hidden from public records. Since the sale, rent has skyrocketed, and now, just 6 months later, eviction notices are appearing on every door. Residents were told to make rent checks out to the old trailer park name, but with LLC added to the end, and to mail them to that same Englewood, New Jersey P.O. Box, the one linked to the supposed Homes of America company. That P.O. Box belongs to Byron Fields, the same professional football player listed on LinkedIn. Back in college, he interned at Walden, and now he's shown as the managing director of multiple trailer parks purchased by Homes for America. But here's the real story. Byron Fields didn't buy this park. After some digging, I found that the true buyer is Thomas Del Bose, an executive at Alden who acquired the property through a nonprofit front called Homes for America. He's also a top manager at Smith Management. Alden owns stakes in both my local newspaper and a larger regional one, which explains why neither of them is covering the story. The company also appears in the Panama Papers, known for hiding its money offshore. Among Alden's investors are the Knight Foundation, ironically a nonprofit that funds sustainable journalism, as well as Coca-Cola employee pension funds, SG Group, CalPERS, which is the California Public Employees Retirement System, and several Swiss financial institutions and charitable trusts. So, to sum it up, a billionaire hedge fund manager hiding behind a nonprofit and a former football player's name bought out the land where my students live and is now forcing them and their families out of their homes for profit. More than 236 employee pension funds from Digital First Media were invested in Alden, even though the company claimed it would withdraw those funds this year. How can hedge funds even operate through nonprofit organizations? They buy up newspapers, destroy them by cutting staff in half, and at the same time create nonprofits under the banner of sustainable journalism,
all while investing the employees' pension savings from the papers they bought into their own hedge fund. When you have that much money, you can mercilessly buy everything in sight, squeeze out profit, and toss workers and tenants onto the street. We need to start jailing hedge fund managers and landlord speculators, nationalize the banking system, and guarantee Americans the right to housing. Honestly, it makes my blood boil how deeply financial elites exploit ordinary Americans. I believe my students feel like part of our school community, and an eviction would traumatize them and drive their parents even deeper into poverty. One third grader, nicknamed Little Tony, told me his dad now works every single day of the week trying to earn enough to cover the rising rent and delay their eviction. He's such a sweet kid, and he loves school. I don't want to see him just swept aside. Update 3. This update shows a photo of the author handing out flyers to residents, explaining who's responsible for everything happening. The main thing here is the mystery surrounding someone named Tom Del Bosca. Okay, this isn't the first time I've seen or heard that name, and every time I try to look him up, it leads to nothing. Every mention of Tom Del Bosca is tied to some public dealings, but it all goes nowhere. I think the name Tom Del Bosca is mostly used as a pseudonym or front to hide the real person or group of people, or it's a total information wipe. If you Google Tom Del Bosca, you'll just find random people from around the world. If you look up Alden Global, you'll see it's a hedge fund, and that's it. No story, no clients, no staff. But you can notice they coincidentally own a bunch of news outlets. I don't believe for a second that's a coincidence. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and trust me, it won't be the last. I wouldn't even be surprised if local or federal media say nothing about the buyouts and mass evictions. It's all extremely shady. But now I wonder, how did the author even get that flyer with all the contact info and help resources? Personally, I don't think it came from anyone she knows. But I do know one thing. Everyone in that area will leave eventually, for one reason or another. If you search Tom Del Bosca or Alden Global, all you get are junk search results. Not even a single photo of this person's face. It's like he literally paid to be erased from the internet. Update 4. I typed up a flyer on my phone about the mass evictions happening in the trailer park where my students live. When I went to FedEx to print it, the girl behind the counter asked if she could post it on social media. I said sure. I parked near the school and started walking along the highway. When I reached the park, I began talking to families sitting outside or in their cars. Every single person was kind and grateful that I was doing something. I was afraid the park management would kick me out. It's happened before, but apparently no one has seen the managers for several days. So, what did I learn? An elderly man is being evicted over $12. The new mobile payment app they're now required to use adds insane service fees. HUD vouchers and housing aid checks are getting returned to sender, leaving residents thousands of dollars in rent debt. A few days ago, the new park manager left a 100-page stack of new rules on people's doorsteps, with fines for every violation. The most disgusting rule, each household is now allowed only one pet. One man invited me inside his trailer where he lives with his young son. The bathroom floor had literally collapsed. Residents were told that if they don't pay the new fees by October 28th, they'll have 3 days to move out before eviction proceedings start. More than half the residents have lived there less than a year. The turnover is massive. Almost everyone said it was the only place they could move into immediately and afford. Rent ranges from $400 to $800. Some trailers have been there since the 1970s. All eviction notices are just taped to people's porches. I saw that the rent payment app doesn't work. No contacts, no ownership info, nothing. One resident showed me she was being fined for dates before she even moved in. Another woman said half her trailer doesn't have electricity. 3 men I spoke with work at a weapons factory, one at Walmart, one in construction. Only about half the people I talked to were white. 3 mentioned having disabilities. All in all, I spent about 3 hours there talking to as many people as I could. Strangely, I didn't see a single one of my students. I walked back along the highway after dark. On the flyers, I left my phone number, but no one's called yet. I'm planning to go back another day at a different time to talk to even more people. I'm exhausted. Typing this while sitting in the bathtub, that's all for now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all these stories, especially the last one.
I showed my husband a silly joke, he got angry and left. Then I found out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and I, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends, let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged. It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward I squeezed too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers. So I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile, but after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going, but he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy. It's part of who I am. And he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid little lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion man joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this?
Update 1. I followed your advice and gave him space. Reading your comments made me question how accurate my idea of our perfect marriage really was. I still believe we were good together, but maybe I missed something. Anyway, some of you were right. It wasn't really about the lotion man, but you were also partly wrong. Something did happen during that lunch with our friends. My husband came back a couple of days ago. He apologized and said he wanted to talk. I agreed. I missed him so much, even though I tried not to show it. He told me the whole story. So, we had lunch with our friends, Kai, 30M, and Marie, 29F. They'd just gotten engaged. It was a buffet-style restaurant, so people kept getting up for food. At some point, my husband and Marie went together. Or maybe it was near the end. I remember chatting with Kai alone for a while before they came back. Either way, they were alone briefly. Marie apparently confessed to my husband that when Kai proposed, she realized she was actually in love with him. But she still said yes to Kai and tried to suppress her feelings. That's why she invited us to lunch as some kind of closure. But instead of closure, she told my husband she wanted to run away with him. Marie is annoyingly gorgeous. Blonde, blue-eyed, tall and thin like a runway model. Think Emma Watson, but colder. I hate how much that bothers me. My husband said he politely turned her down and wished her well, but admitted that her confession messed with his head. We all went to college together, so we've known each other for years. When I came out of the shower later that day, laughing with a towel on my head and making silly jokes with the Loesch man, he said something in him just snapped. According to him, my immaturity in that moment clashed with how mature and graceful Marie had seemed. It triggered some sort of emotional panic about our marriage, so he ran off to his brother's place. He claims that after a few days apart, he realized how much he loved me and came home. I just stared at him in disbelief. I asked a few questions, then told him to sleep on the couch for the night. He agreed. I didn't sleep at all. I still can't believe he almost threw away our marriage over some emotional fantasy with a woman who's engaged. The more I think about it, the harder it is to even look at him. We've since had Thanksgiving dinner with his family and even spent a night together again. I think he believes everything is fine now. And honestly, part of me wants to forgive and move on, just to feel normal again. But I don't know what to do next. He'll be home from work in about 6 hours. I'm a teacher, so I have the day off, and my brain's been spinning with options all morning. A, tell Kai what his fiancée did. My husband begged me not to, saying Marie just had a moment of weakness. B, contact Marie directly, either to confront her or to have a calm talk, though that sounds unlikely. C, call Tyler, my husband's brother, and ask if my husband ever really stayed with him. His house is uncomfortably close to Marie's, and that makes me nervous. D, do all of the above. I honestly don't know what I'll do yet. I showed my husband a silly joke, and he got angry, walked out, and never came back. Turns out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. This is usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first post here. Honestly, I never thought I'd write something like this. My husband, 30M, and I, 27F, always seemed great together. Sure, we had little arguments now and then, but overall, it felt like a fairy tale. We got married in April 2021, and everything since then had gone smoothly. Or so I thought. That afternoon, we'd just gotten home from lunch with our engaged friends. Let's call them Kai and Marie. It was a nice, ordinary get-together. We even brought home some amazing pasta. Since our apartment is tiny, my husband took a shower first while I cleaned up. After he was done, I went in. When I got out, I put some lotion on, accidentally squeezed out too much, and wiped off the extra. On a whim, I drew a little lotion smiley face on my thumb. A lotion man. I walked out giggling and said something like, "Look, it's a lotion man!" He just stared at me. No smile, no reaction, just blinked. I tried to keep the joke going in a silly voice, rambling and laughing, thinking he'd eventually laugh too. Instead, he stood up and left. At first, I thought he was joking, but he grabbed his keys, got into his truck, and drove away. At first, I didn't believe it. Then panic hit. His truck was still packed from a recent trip, enough stuff for a couple of weeks. I texted him several times. He only replied once, saying he was thinking about things and staying at his brother's Tyler's. Since then, he stopped answering. Hours passed. I just stared at the door in disbelief. I felt stupid. All this over a dumb lotion joke? He'd never left like that before, not even during rough times. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering what I'd done wrong.
First update. I followed the advice people gave me and gave him space. But reading everyone's comments made me think maybe our perfect marriage wasn't as perfect as I believed. And turns out you were right about something happening during that lunch. My husband came back a couple of days later, apologized, and said he wanted to talk. He told me that while I was chatting with Kai, Marie had confessed to him that she was in love with him and had been since college. She said she'd accepted Kai's proposal, hoping the feelings would fade, but seeing my husband again brought everything back. She even asked him to leave me for her. He said he turned her down and wished her well, but he admitted that the confession messed with his head, that he started comparing us. Marie was beautiful, confident, and composed. Meanwhile, I'd been goofing around in a towel, laughing about a lotion face. He said it made him suddenly question our whole relationship, and that's why he panicked and left. I was speechless. He said he realized how stupid it was and that he still loved me. I told him to sleep on the couch. Since then, he's been acting like everything's fine again, but I can't unhear what he said, that another woman's confession made him doubt me. I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way. He thinks we can just move on, but I'm torn. Part of me still loves him, another part wants to scream. I've been thinking about telling Kai what Marie did, but my husband begged me not to, saying she just made a mistake. I'm not sure I believe that. Second update. Thank you all so much for the love and support. Seriously, I didn't expect such kindness. My last post was deleted, but here's what happened since. I took your advice. I talked to everyone involved. Kai, Marie, my husband, and Tyler. What I found out completely shattered me. When I met with Kai, I told him everything I knew. He was skeptical at first, then broke down crying. Turns out Marie had told him nothing. Together, we went to confront her. At first, she denied everything. Then she snapped. The truth came out, and it was so much worse than I imagined. My husband wasn't innocent. He was the one who'd started everything. He had suggested to Marie that before she officially married Kai, the three of them, him, Marie, and another woman, should spend a night together, and Marie had agreed. Apparently, this wasn't new. She'd been cheating on Kai for years, with both men and women, and my husband had been cheating on me just as long. They covered for each other. Marie said she backed out of that threesome idea at the last minute because she wanted to be faithful now that she was engaged. My husband got angry, and not long after, I showed him the lotion man. He snapped, left, and ran off. Later, I spoke with Tyler. He said my husband came over around 11 p.m. and left at 8 a.m., meaning there were about 3 hours unaccounted for. He guessed my husband might have just driven around to clear his head, but that didn't sound like him. That night, when my husband fell asleep early, I went through his phone. At first, nothing. Then I found a hidden folder, and there they were, dozens of nudes. Not mine, not Marie's either, from another woman. Let's call her Allison. Stunning redhead, hourglass figure. Their messages went back to February, right before Valentine's Day when I was planning a surprise for him. She didn't even know he was married until recently. When she found out, she was furious. And here's the part that made me sick. My husband told her he would bring me to a hotel to prove that I was okay with their affair. Sound familiar? It was the same idea he'd pitched to Marie. After that, I couldn't even pretend anymore. The next morning, I packed my things. He cried, begged, swore he loved only me, blamed his weakness for redheads, said I was the only one that mattered. I told him it was over. The apartment is in his name, so I left. Right now, I'm staying with Kai. He's heartbroken too. We both are. I don't know what comes next, divorce, therapy, or just trying to survive this. But at least now, I know the truth. His fiancée meant everything to him. We sat together for a long time, hugging, crying, saying all kinds of nonsense, just trying to hold ourselves together. He tried to cheer me up and made lunch. It turned out great. He's an amazing cook. I showed him my 2 previous posts, and he laughed at some of your comments. As far as I know, my almost ex-husband is now with Marie. I don't care about them. Honestly, it even feels kind of nice, like a chapter has finally closed and I don't have to tiptoe around anymore like I did these past few days. Tomorrow, Kai and I are going to the gym for yoga, to relax and maybe figure out what to do next. We both took a day off, and I'm sorting out my finances. I hope to start the divorce process soon, so I can finally call him my ex. I'm still a complete mess. My desk is still covered with our photos, and our wedding picture is still the wallpaper on all my devices.
I know my students will notice his sudden disappearance from my life, and I'll have to tell them that the guy I used to talk so much about is now divorcing me. I'll have to tell my family and friends too, the ones who are my main support right now. It hurts to realize that eventually Kai and I will have to move out separately, because he's the only real support I have in this whole mess. Housing, divorce expenses, lawyers, therapy. Sigh, so much ahead. It's hard to believe I once thought this relationship was perfect. Anyway, thank you all so much. I've already written about how much support I've received here, but honestly, your sincerity and kindness, without exaggeration, saved my life. I would have kept living with that cheater otherwise, and Kai too. This community is incredible. So many kind people who care, follow my story, and wish me well. I'll definitely come back for advice again, but please know I've read everything, yes, everything, and I've seen all your kind words. Author's note. I've been scrolling through the comments for a while now, and honestly, I'm amazed at how many people responded to my story. There's a lot I need to clarify, so here we go. Not much has changed. It's only been a week since my last update. My husband and I briefly talked about the upcoming divorce, that's all. I'm still healing, working, and slowly getting back to myself. Ask me again in a year, maybe I'll be better then. As for Allison, the mistress, I still haven't been able to contact her, though some of your advice really inspired me to try again. And about Kai and me, I know many of you are discussing this, so I'll clarify right away. Kai and I are rebuilding our friendship. Honestly, I don't think we'd work as a couple. Kai wants a calm and independent life for two, while I dream of having kids. He admitted that he has a very low libido, one of the reasons he blames himself for everything that happened. And mine, on the contrary, is high. Plus, now we're more like brother and sister. Still, thank you for worrying about my options. I'm not ready to date yet, and probably won't be for a while. This story is fake. Huh, gotcha. Just kidding. I wish it were fake. No curses on you if you don't believe me. Not everything on the internet can be trusted, and I doubt I can convince you otherwise. But unfortunately, yes, I live in this reality, and no hate messages will change that.
About family, friends, students, and so on. My family is, of course, on my side. Most of our mutual friends, too. Yes, I told my students everything, and you know what? They were incredibly supportive. I've already cleared my desk of all reminders of him. The next step is to clear my head of that lotion-scented man. I tried to recreate his look as best I could. I'll post a photo on my profile soon. Edit. There he is. If I missed something, let me know. There are so many comments. I haven't gone through all the new messages yet, and I'm really sorry I can't reply to everyone. I'm super busy right now, but I hope to catch up with some of you over the weekend. Third update. Oh God, that title is awful. Sorry, I'll come up with something better once my brain starts working again. It's that time of year, you know? Check in on your teacher friends if you have any. Hey everyone, it's been a long time, but I finally logged back into this account. And wow, I don't even know where to start. So much support, so many New Year wishes. It's just incredible. I love the internet sometimes. You were with me when I was at my lowest point. I've gotten dozens of messages asking how I've been, what's new, and even stories from people who went through almost the same thing. One girl said her boyfriend blamed everything on their new puppy. Seriously. She even sent a photo of that little fluff ball. It's crazy how such a painful experience turned out to be so common. Still, I haven't lost faith in humanity, thanks to the wave of love you've all given me. It's been almost 2 years now. It feels like both an eternity ago and just yesterday. All right, to the point. Let's start with the bad news. Kai and I had a pretty big fight. I won't go into every detail, that would take about 30 pages, but long story short, we were roommates. We lived together, shared everything, chores, shopping, daily life. Whenever I went to the store, he knew it. I knew when he got home from work. We were just always aware of each other's schedules because we lived side by side and ran a shared household.
At some point, Kai told me he was going on a date. Cool, I was happy for him. I was still deep in the divorce process then, emotionally shattered, not thinking about relationships at all. Kai and Marie, since they never married, broke up a bit easier than I did, but it was still hard. He went on one date, then another, and that was it. A week passed without news, so I asked, what happened? He just said she was ghosting him. Then a week later, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. He was dating Marie. I know, sounds insane, right? But he told me this while sitting on the couch crying like a kid. And I couldn't even be mad. I just felt sorry for him. It's not easy to recover from broken relationships. He said those dates made him realize that everything between them really was over for good. He described it like this, or close to it. When I first met Marie, she seemed like a sweet, polite girl next door, like a cashier with a kind smile. But as I got to know her, I found out she was fun and free-spirited. That's what I fell for. And when I saw her again recently, it felt like she'd reset to factory settings. That hit him hard, like he'd gone full circle for nothing. After 2 dates, he didn't just ghost her, he blocked her everywhere. It was a bit hard for me to listen to. It reminded me way too much of my own situation, but I tried not to dwell on it and just comforted him. For a few months after that, everything was calm. During that time, Kai turned me into a total gym girl. It's funny rereading my old posts, how skeptical I was about the gym back then. Anyway, after a few peaceful months, Kai had news again. He was going on another date, this time with a friend of a friend. I said the usual, great, go for it. I was still angry at the world, still legally married, so I wasn't thinking about new relationships at all. As I mentioned, Kai and I unintentionally kept tabs on each other because of how we lived. So when he started leaving home at 2 p.m. and returning at 8 p.m., his dates lasting hours, of course I noticed. I didn't say anything. I figured maybe he was just smitten, which made sense. But his absences were pretty noticeable. He even asked me to do little errands for him because he knew he wouldn't have time due to his long outings. Eventually, I met the girl. Her name was Grace. She was in her 20s, very sweet, and also a teacher. She worked in an elementary school, but we still had a lot to talk about. At that point, everything seemed perfect. Kai and Grace were adorable together. Summer went by peacefully, everything felt stable. I had just officially finalized my divorce.
But damn, those dates were endless. Even the short ones lasted 3 or 4 hours. He would just disappear. So I finally decided to bring it up, carefully. Kai said that Grace usually picked the meeting spots herself, places 1 or 2 hours away with traffic. When I asked where Grace actually lived, maybe they were meeting halfway, he calmly said, I don't really know. That's when alarm bells went off in my head. Maybe I've read too many infidelity forums, but something about it felt off. Grace couldn't have lived that far away. She was friends with one of our mutual acquaintances. They'd been dating for months. She'd even had dinner at our place more than once. And yet, he didn't know where she lived. And all their meetings happened miles away. Suspicious much? So yeah, I probably crossed a line. I searched her name on Instagram and boom. Grace in a wedding dress with some guy named Mike. The post was from 2019. She was married. I shot up from bed and ran straight to wake Kai up. Yes, I know, total idiot move. It was midnight, he had work at 7 a.m., and there I was, waving my phone in his face like a lunatic. When I finally stopped rambling, Kai exploded. He went from groggy to furious in 2 seconds flat. He started yelling at me for invading his privacy, demanding why the hell I was snooping in his relationship. When I tried to explain my concerns, he got even angrier. Within minutes, it turned into a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of crossing every possible line, which honestly was partially true. But we'd lived together, always knowing what was going on in each other's lives. I asked him why he was mad if I was just worried about him. He fired back that I was obsessed with him, that he'd long felt like our friendship had crossed the line, and that was why I was stalking him. That's when I lost it completely. I said things I regret, brought up Marie, and told him I wouldn't date him for $1 million. He started yelling back, calling me names. It was ugly. Eventually, I stormed out. The next morning, he woke me up before work. I thought he'd cooled off. maybe even come to apologize. But instead, he dropped a bomb. He knew. He'd known Grace was married almost from the start, but didn't care. Apparently, her husband was a good guy, but Grace told Kai she didn't feel anything for him anymore. So, he just went along with it. I was stunned. I asked him how he'd feel if Marie's lovers knew she was engaged and still slept with her. He got defensive again, shouting at me not to bring up Marie. We argued, not as loud as the night before, but still heated. He said that he'd kept it secret because he knew I'd make a scene. I told him that cheating was a deep wound for me, and I expected it to be the same for him. But he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's not." Then he added that living with me was already like being in a relationship and that I had no right to interfere in his personal life. That one really hit hard. I said, "Fine, date whoever you want. I just wanted you to know you're helping someone cheat." He shrugged, said he didn't care, and left for work. I wasn't his mother, I couldn't control him, but I thought he deserved to know he'd become the other man. If I were in his place, I'd want someone to tell me the truth, and if someone told me my partner was cheating, I'd end it instantly. But Kai's moral compass, it seems, worked differently. We kept living together for a bit, but the atmosphere became cold and strained. I lost respect for him. He still saw Grace, and worse, seemed convinced I had feelings for him. Eventually, I packed my things and moved in with a friend. It turned out to be the best decision, even though it was far from work. As for my ex-husband, not long after the divorce was finalized, he got engaged to another woman. Right after I'd moved out, I hit rock bottom. There was chaos at school over AI and student essays. I was trying to build a new life in a place where I knew no one, and the loneliness was eating me alive. I tried a few dates, but they were all so mediocre I gave up, which somehow made the loneliness worse. And just when I thought things couldn't get bleaker, my ex reached out. He told me about his engagement, his new life, and how happy he was. Said he was working on self-improvement and wanted to apologize, in person. He promised it wasn't a date, that he expected nothing from me. I should have said no, but I was emotionally drained, and the idea of closure sounded like relief. So, I agreed.
At first, it was civil. We exchanged small talk. He even gave a genuine apology. But then he started asking questions. How was I doing? Was I seeing anyone? And when he realized I wasn't doing great, that smirk appeared. That same smug Cheshire Cat grin I'd seen before. He started bragging about his new fiancée, about how beautiful she was, about how amazing his life had become. Then he said, "Honestly, our breakup was a blessing in disguise." It felt like a knife in my chest. All those years I'd given him, and he called them a burden? Eventually, I made some excuse and left. I wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously, and I regretted agreeing to meet him at all. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After months of dragging myself through the days, I finally went on another date. That's when I met Chase. 29, bright, kind, a total goofball. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I used to think I needed a brooding, mysterious man to balance my energy. But here's my advice. If you're a sunny person, don't look for someone dark to complete you. Find someone who shines with you. Chase makes me laugh every day. There are no fake conversations, no one-sided love, just two weird, happy people being completely themselves. We joke, we dream, we build new memories, and life finally feels alive again. Now, it's 2025. I've got my own place near work. I even started going back to my old gym. And of course, that's where I saw Kai again. He didn't notice me at first, but when he did, he came right up, apologized sincerely, and said he regretted how things ended. Told me he'd be glad if we could talk again someday. Maybe we will. Maybe not. Honestly,
He feels like a character from the first movie who suddenly shows up in the sequel, someone from a chapter that's long since closed. My life now feels completely different, with Chase, with my own home, with peace and laughter. Well, except for one thing, the lotion man. Yes, I finally showed Chase the infamous drawing. My hands were shaking, but I did it. He burst out laughing so hard he cried. Now it's become our little tradition. We've got the soap man, the ketchup man, the cream man, even the floor man. Don't ask. Everything with a doodled face becomes a character, and each has a ridiculous accent. And honestly, it's perfect. Life moves on. We heal, we grow, we laugh again. And the best part? I've stopped apologizing for who I am. Because if you shine too bright for the box you're in, the problem isn't your light. It's the box. So get out of it. I'll never apologize again for being myself.
I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time, and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration, but in the evening she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up,
My daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious. After school, I approached Pat's car and asked Casey to show me her hand. She tried to hide the ring, but I simply took it off her finger. On the inside, there was an engraving with my grandmother's maiden name. Pat started screaming and claimed that my daughter had given the ring to her daughter herself. Then she said they had actually bought it, but it was obvious that it was a lie. Later, Pat called me and began accusing me of humiliating her daughter and destroying her confidence. I never heard an apology. Her husband, Hank, was a completely different person. He worked several jobs to support the family and always looked exhausted. Pat pressured him, manipulated him, and demanded that he have more children with her. Over time, it became clear that he was in a deep depression. In our community, there was a woman named Lena who organized a program to help brides. She collected donated wedding dresses and gave them to women who couldn't afford to buy a new one. One day, Pat decided to renew her wedding vows with her husband and hold a new wedding ceremony. She literally pushed another couple out of their reserved date at the farm, insisting that her celebration had to take place on that exact day. Then she fell in love with one particular dress that had already been reserved for another bride. Eventually, Pat simply switched the packages and sent that girl a different dress. When she was exposed, she claimed that it was her dress. After that, Lena banned her from even entering the dress storage. But a few weeks before the ceremony, Lena accidentally discovered that Pat had still kept that exact dress for herself. That evening, Lena and I secretly went into the room where it was hanging. Lena took out a pair of scissors and simply cut out the entire back part of the dress. Then she carefully hung it back inside the garment bag. The next morning, Pat called me in hysterics. She was crying and saying her dress was ruined. She even asked to borrow my wedding dress. I refused. In the end, Lena brought her an old, huge, and very strange dress from the storage collection. Pat was furious, but she had no other choice. At the ceremony, she looked absolutely miserable. The dress was far too big, wrinkled, and strange. She kept holding it up with her hand so she wouldn't step on the hem. There were very few guests. People had simply grown tired of her behavior. After that incident, Pat changed a lot. She became quieter and started avoiding everyone. Soon, her husband Hank sought help from a psychologist. Gradually, he began to look much calmer and eventually moved out to live with his parents.
after some time, he filed for divorce. Pat slowly distanced herself from our community, removed many acquaintances from her social media, and almost stopped appearing at gatherings. I am 48 years old. I have known Pat for a very long time. She is about the same age as me. As far back as I can remember, even when we were young, she was obsessed with the dream of having 5 children and living the perfect family life in a house with a white picket fence. In college, I gradually stopped communicating with her. Over time, it became clear that she was a person without principles. She was manipulative, pushy, and constantly tried to make people feel sorry for her. Her behavior often seemed both unpleasant and ridiculous at the same time. I lived my life peacefully and barely thought about her for many years, but one day Pat found me on Facebook. Out of politeness, I accepted her friend request. It turned out that she had become the mother of 5 children and was raising them with a completely permissive parenting style. The kids did whatever they wanted, and she never stopped them. Moreover, she forced her daughters to call me aunt. Pat tried to send her children to my house without warning, constantly called me, tried to occupy all my time, and even began showing up at my workplace. I tried to set boundaries, but she constantly found ways to get around them. My husband and I organized small gatherings for new people in our community. In fact, it was a support initiative. We helped homeless people and those who had found themselves in difficult circumstances. Our community's base was located on a farm that belonged to an elderly couple. There was a large barn, a nice open area, and a green meadow with a small artificial lake. Sometimes weddings were held there. Pat began showing up actively at our gatherings. She never missed an event and tried to take part in all the organizational matters, but her children behaved terribly. During one party, they even ended up in my bedroom, even though there was a separate entertainment area for children. We had to watch them the whole time, so my husband and I couldn't even properly enjoy our own party. A few days later, Pat called me and tried to talk about her children's behavior, but she interrupted me and started talking only about herself. In the end, she announced that her children wanted to come over again and use our pool. I simply stayed silent. Soon afterward, her middle daughter called me and said that her mother had allowed her to spend the entire summer at our house. I had to explain to the child that it wasn't true. Over time, more and more disturbing stories about Pat began to appear. On social media, people complained that she would ask them to watch her children for a couple of hours, but then leave them there for the entire day. Others wrote that she borrowed money and never paid it back. Once, she volunteered to help wrap Christmas gifts for children from low-income families. After that, several nice toys disappeared. Later, they accidentally appeared under her own Christmas tree. There was also an incident at Casey's birthday party. My daughter went there for the celebration, but in the evening she called me in tears. She was ignored the entire time because she hadn't brought Casey the expensive gift that Casey had essentially demanded. When I arrived to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone inside the house while everyone else was having fun outside. Later, the situation became even worse. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandmother's antique ring. It wasn't expensive, but it had great sentimental value for our family. A few days later, I noticed that my daughter had become quiet and withdrawn. She didn't want to go to school, but she wouldn't explain why. Later, her friend told the truth. Pat's eldest daughter, Casey, asked to try on the ring and simply never returned it. Then she said she had accidentally lost the jewelry. In reality, she wore it to school and even spread rumors that my daughter had supposedly tried to steal the ring. When I learned the truth, I was furious.
Many years ago, my wife's grandfather found an unusual bag of seeds in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. The discovery was made near Roaring River Park in the southwestern part of the state. The bag was lying on top of a hill and looked remarkably well preserved. Although it had likely been exposed to the elements for a long time, there were no visible signs of damage or stains. The material proved to be strong and flexible. When at rest, the bag looked slightly wrinkled, but it could still be opened and closed. Out of caution, the find was barely touched, limited to just a few photographs. Inside, there were several hundred seeds of at least 2 different species. Such discoveries are extremely rare. Only one similar artifact is known, a bag of seeds kept at the University of Arkansas. It also contains seeds of ancient plants, ancestors of which still grow in this region today. Interestingly, both bags were found approximately 80 kilometers apart. Later, the owners contacted the university and arranged to transfer the find for research. Over time, more details about the artifact's origin came to light. In fact, the bag had been discovered back in the mid-1960s by 2 men, Jerry Weber and Andy Jewell. Andy had worked for many years as a surveyor for the railroad, farmed, and spent most of his life outdoors. After the discovery, the bag was placed in a glass jar where it remained for about 65 years. Over time, some of the information about the circumstances of the find was lost as Andy Jewell passed away in the early 2000s. Later, relatives were able to recover some details. It turned out the bag was not found simply in the open, but on a rock ledge inside a small grotto on the hillside. In the same area, Andy had found other ancient items, stone tools and arrowheads. All of these discoveries were kept together for many years. It is likely that the find site was located in Berry County, near Roaring River Park. Andy lived in the Dry Hollow area between the towns of Cassville and Seligman, and the bag may have been found near the Washburn Prairie. Pinpointing the exact location is difficult now, as most people directly involved in the story have passed away. Gathering all the available information and the old artifacts, the family decided to show the find to experts and brought it to the University of Arkansas Museum. The bag was placed in a special storage room in the museum collection, a controlled environment where archaeological artifacts are preserved. The museum curator, Dr. Mary Suter, carefully laid out the bag, seeds, and stone tools for inspection. After the initial examination, she retrieved a scientific book about woven artifacts found in rock shelters of the Ozark Mountains. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an illustration of a bag that matched almost perfectly in weave, color, and construction with the new find. The news quickly spread among museum staff, and other specialists began arriving in the room. Many noted that such artifacts are extremely rare. Archaeologists explained that rock grottos and natural shelters were often used by the region's ancient inhabitants to store items and supplies. These are precisely the kinds of locations where organic materials, which normally decompose quickly, might sometimes survive. According to preliminary assessments, the bag belongs to the pre-contact period, the time before Europeans arrived in North America. Its exact age is still unknown, but it can be confidently stated that it is at least 500 years old and likely much older. To determine a more precise age, radiocarbon dating will be needed. Since the artifact is linked to the cultural heritage of native peoples, the museum must coordinate with the Osage tribe before conducting research. Afterward, samples can be sent to another university for laboratory analysis. For now, the bag, seeds, and other items remain at the University of Arkansas Museum, where they are being preserved under appropriate conditions and studied by archaeologists. Seed bags like this are considered exceptionally rare finds. Before this discovery, archaeologists knew of only 2 similar bags from Eden Bluff and another heavily damaged one that contained acorns.
Organic materials, such as plant fibers and seeds, usually decompose quickly, so their preservation over hundreds or even thousands of years is highly unusual. Museum specialists immediately began photographing the seeds and stone items to share with other researchers. One of the small black seeds initially puzzled the scientists, but after discussion, they concluded that all of the seeds are very old and no longer viable for germination. Along with the bag, the family also donated several stone tools and arrowheads that Andy Jewell had found. Archaeologist Jared Piard, who specializes in ancient stone implements, quickly determined that these items belong to two different archaeological periods. Some date back to the Middle Archaic period, roughly 2000 to 5000 BCE, and others are from the Woodland Culture period, spanning approximately the first millennium BCE to the first millennium AD. However, these finds can only indirectly help in dating the bag, since it's unclear which of these items were originally found with it. After the preliminary inspection, Dr. Mary Suter decided to show another similar artifact from the museum collection. She led the guests deeper into the storage area, which houses thousands of archaeological artifacts. Among the many shelves with cataloged boxes, she found a collection from excavations conducted in 1932. The box contained various ancient items, shells, bones, fragments of cords, and other objects. Among them was a bag that proved to be almost identical in weave, color, and construction with the new find. It was a little larger, but far more deteriorated. The material was heavily damaged and bound with a piece of leather. Inside, the excavation had uncovered only half of an old carved pipe. Interestingly, this bag was also found in Barry County, Missouri, just a few kilometers from the location where Andy Jewell found his find. Unfortunately, the 1932 artifact has never been radiocarbon dated, so its precise age remains unknown. Next, the researchers showed another famous specimen, the renowned Eden Bluff seed bag. It is approximately 2,000 years old, but is so well preserved that it appears almost new. Examining the museum collection, you could see a vast number of archaeological finds associated with the ancient inhabitants of the Ozarks. The storage houses ceramics, tools, jewelry, and other items that help researchers reconstruct the history of the region. After all the research, the family decided to formally donate the discovered bag to the University of Arkansas Museum. The artifact was formally handed over to the Osage tribe, considered the custodian of many cultural treasures of the region's native peoples. The museum itself is responsible for preserving and scientifically studying such artifacts. The bag was placed in a specialized storage unit with stable temperature and humidity. Under these conditions, the artifact can be preserved for decades and remain accessible for research. The family had long worried whether they could properly preserve such an ancient and valuable item. In the museum, it is now under expert supervision, ensuring not only proper storage conditions, but also continued scientific study. Researchers emphasize that archaeological artifacts are of immense importance for understanding history. That is why, when such items are found, it is recommended to leave them in place and notify specialists who can properly document and study the discovery. The story of this bag ended positively. It is now in a secure location where scientists can study it, and the find will help provide a better understanding of the lives of people who lived in this region centuries ago. In the future, radiocarbon dating of the seeds and a detailed analysis of the bag's material are planned. Once these studies are complete, more will be known about its exact age and origin.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition, we left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge. But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was. Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given x-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous.
What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving. That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets.
The dog sitter accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets. During our trip, we left our 2 dogs in the care of a dog sitter we found through a specialized pet sitting service. The guy seemed very nice and responsible. Before leaving, we carefully explained all the rules to him. We showed him where the dog food was stored, how exactly to feed the dogs, the proportions for mixing their food, and where all the necessary supplies were kept. In addition, we left a written instruction sheet with all the details so he wouldn't run into any difficulties. On the morning before our departure, we even fed the dogs together with him so he could see with his own eyes exactly how everything was done. It seemed to us that after such an explanation, it would be almost impossible to make a mistake. Throughout the trip, he stayed in touch with us and occasionally sent messages about how our pets were doing. Because of that, we were confident that everything was going smoothly. But one morning, he texted us saying the dogs were refusing to eat their breakfast. We didn't think much of it, since that sometimes happens when the owners are away from home. When we returned home, the first thing I noticed was the strange appearance of the food in their bowls. Normally, we don't just give them dry kibble. We pour hot water over it, add a bit of goat's milk, and mix in a digestive prebiotic. The result is a mixture that looks like a dark porridge.
But this time, something looked completely wrong. It was much darker than usual and had an unusual texture. I asked my husband what that strange mass in the bowls was. Soon it became clear that the problem was much serious. When we went upstairs, we saw that the dogs had vomited on our bed. The sight was very unpleasant, but even worse was realizing that there were strange pieces mixed in with the vomit. That's when we understood what had happened. The dog sitter had accidentally fed the dogs wood pellets meant for a grill, mistaking them for dog food. These pellets were stored in a large bag on the floor in the pantry. The package clearly said grill pellets in large letters. Right next to it was the container with the dog food, which was also clearly labeled. Apparently, on the first night after we left, the dogs ate those pellets. After that, they started feeling unwell, which is why they refused food afterward. Judging by everything, they had gone almost 2 days without eating. We immediately called our veterinarian. Since it was Sunday, the doctor promised to call us back a bit later. In the meantime, we were advised to closely monitor the dog's condition and watch for any new symptoms. At the same time, we contacted a pet poison control hotline. They explained that wood pellets themselves are usually not highly toxic. However, they can cause serious stomach discomfort, digestive problems, or even an intestinal blockage. The situation was complicated by the fact that pellets can be made from different types of wood. Some types of wood can be dangerous for dogs. Among the potentially toxic ones are oak, cherry, plum, prune, horse chestnut, and yew. We checked the composition of our pellets. They contained hickory and maple. In addition, similar blends sometimes include flavorings or even leftover wood from whiskey barrels, which means the composition can be quite varied. That's why we decided not to take any risks and drove to a 24-hour veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, my husband called the dog sitter and told him what had happened. The guy was shocked and began sincerely apologizing. He explained that he hadn't understood exactly where the dog food was and mistakenly used the wrong bag. We also reported the incident to the service through which we had hired him. They opened an official case and said they would conduct an investigation. It also turned out that the platform provides insurance coverage of up to $25,000 for veterinary expenses. At the clinic, the dogs were examined and given x-rays. Fortunately, the veterinarians found no signs of an intestinal blockage. That was a huge relief for us. However, the vets warned us to monitor the dogs carefully over the next few days. It was especially important to watch for any symptoms related to kidney problems, since certain types of wood can cause toxic reactions. Luckily, the next morning things already looked much better. Both dogs ate normally and were able to go to the bathroom. The food stayed down and there were no new episodes of vomiting. It seemed that their bodies had handled the problem. Despite that, the stress we experienced was enormous. What surprised me most was that we specifically showed the dog sitter where the food was and had even fed the dogs together with him before leaving. That's why it's very hard to understand how he could confuse the dog food container with a large bag of wood pellets. After this incident, we decided to move the pellet bag to a different place so that something like this would never happen again. Fortunately, everything turned out well this time, but the story shows just how important it is to be extremely careful when it comes to the health of our pets. My boyfriend tried to put my dog to sleep. I'm 23 years old, and I had been dating my boyfriend, Jay, for 3 years. We lived together in a rented apartment, and overall, everything seemed perfectly normal. We didn't have any serious conflicts, which is why what happened came as a complete shock to me. On Friday morning, Jay left for the other side of the country to help his family. That same day, while I was at work, I unexpectedly received a call from my former college roommate, Bob. We used to live together at university, and now he works at a veterinary clinic about 80 kilometers from my home. He asked if I had a dog named Stixie. I immediately became worried and said yes. Then Bob told me that someone had brought a dog that looked very much like mine to their clinic to have it euthanized. He sent me a photo. The dog in the picture was mine. I recognized Stixie instantly. I grew up with him. When I left for university, he was so attached to me that I didn't even consider leaving him at home. He moved with me. Bob decided not to perform the procedure yet and kept the dog with him while trying to figure out what was going on. After work, I immediately drove to him and picked up Stixie. Then Bob showed me something else that completely confirmed what had happened. He had recorded a piece of security camera footage from the veterinary clinic on his phone. In the video, you could clearly see my boyfriend Jay bringing my dog to the clinic. He was even wearing the same clothes he had left the house in that morning before I went to work. When I saw that, I was literally speechless. I couldn't understand why he would do something like that. That day, Jay sent me several messages, just like he usually did when traveling somewhere. He asked how I was doing and whether everything was okay. I replied almost the same way I normally would. But now, every message from him felt completely different. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what he was thinking and what exactly he was trying to hide. I was half in shock and half completely numb. Instead of immediately getting angry, I started going through all possible reasons for his actions in my head. We had sometimes talked about the future. We discussed that in a few years we might move closer to his family in the north or even abroad, but none of that explained why he would decide to get rid of my dog. I was torn between the urge to call him immediately, start a huge argument, throw all his things out of the house, and the desire to stay silent and think everything through first. In the end, I decided not to tell him anything until I figured out what to do next. The first question was practical: how to protect myself and my dog. The apartment we lived in was rented in my name. The lease listed only me, even though Jay paid half of the rent. Because of that, I started looking into whether I could quickly make him move out. My dog, Stixie, was with me at that moment. He's 11 years old. He's gained a bit of weight and moves slower than he did when he was younger, but overall he's healthy. I called a coworker and told her what had happened. She immediately offered to help and even came over to my place so I wouldn't have to be alone. We talked for a long time and discussed the best way to handle things when Jay returned. After that, I started looking into the legal details. It turned out that since only my name was on the lease and we had no written agreements with Jay, he was not officially a tenant. That meant getting him out of the apartment would be much easier than I had originally thought. We decided that when he came back, I wouldn't be alone with him. There would be people in the house to support me. When Jay finally returned, the conversation started with lies. At first, he pretended to be surprised and said he didn't understand where Stixie had gone. He even offered to help look for him. Then he insisted that he knew nothing about anyone taking the dog to a vet to have it euthanized. When he was shown the security footage, he started making up new explanations. First, he claimed that Stixie had supposedly been hit by a car and that he only wanted to end his suffering. But when a living and completely healthy dog was standing right in front of him, that story fell apart too. Then he started getting tangled in his own words and excuses. At one point, the situation became so absurd that he even said, "Maybe I should have put you to sleep instead." After that, any conversation lost all meaning. Together with my coworker and her partner,
I told him that he was no longer welcome in the house and that he needed to take his things and leave. Fortunately, he didn't start a scene and eventually left on his own. I never received any logical explanation for why he tried to get rid of my dog. The only thing left after this whole story was the realization that the person I trusted for 3 years of my life turned out to be nothing like the person I thought he was. And Stixie stayed with me, alive and healthy. Dog.
I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers, and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him. And honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight, and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health,
just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19, he was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the 2nd floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night, when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night? After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth. Otherwise, they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in. And that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left.
At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days, and immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything, the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked, not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night, we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly he admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. "They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals." Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, "All the animals belong to Jake." That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant.
They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them and simply asked, how do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession? The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room. And suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake." I paused and said, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.